And welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blank Gaze. I'm very excited to announce the soft launch of my website. Incredible experience to have gone through the last 10 years working on this little intellectual project. And at the end of this intellectual project, to be able to create some new thinking, which I call headlight steering wheel engine. Just basically mapping the way that humans um, get things done in a business. So the thing that really was powerful, at least for the soft or quick deployment. The other day, I was on the street in my little village here in the country of Georgia. I live in a village of about 2,000 people next to the mountains of the Caucasus on the corner of Russia and Azerbaijan with my little buddy Gordy Gord, my dog. And just every night we go for a walk. We used to run. We've been doing less running lately and more working. I don't know. At some point maybe I can turn up those engines again and go a little faster. Anyways, as you know, I've been testing Replit and Windsurf and Cursor, and I finally decided to stop using Cursor. One reason is because Cursor and Windsurf are very, very similar. And another reason is because I feel like Cursor is trying to focus their attention on professional um, software development, software developers. So they're creating tools directly for people who are specialized in software development. And my feeling is that since OpenAI purchased Windsurf, it's likely that they're going to start to optimize for general users and people who don't have as much software experience. And over time, the platform will be more and more geared toward people that don't have software experience. And I think that there's going to be an advantage there to provide tools for people like me who have absolutely no idea what's going on with software. Now, so I'm walking my dog and I run into some kids on the street. Usually we don't talk too much. Every once in a while, some kids they'll speak a little bit of English and then they'll want to say hi. Anyways, so I'm talking to these kids on the street, and they're like, "Hey, did you ever hear about Lovable and V0?" And I'm like, "What?" Yeah, of course. So it's funny to hear that these little villagers, these village kids, like literally everyone has access to technology these days. There's no stopping it. And if you, as long as you have an internet connection and you have YouTube and you have artificial intelligence, then you can educate yourself, you can learn, you can grow, you can get things done. And it's really just about what tools you're exposed to. So, um, I have this little tool. As you can see, the Replit, it has a really, I mean, if we look over here on the left side of the screen, so here's the agent. The agent can make changes, review its work, debug itself automatically. So the agent here, you can see here the agent, it's about 25 cents every time you want to do something here. And then next we have the assistant answers questions, refines code, and makes precise edits. So you can, so sometimes I use the assistant, sometimes I use the agent. It depends on what I'm working on. I haven't figured out a way to solve this problem, but I did notice that Replit sent me an email the other day, and they were saying, "Hey, we're gonna change the way that we are charging." So because before it was 25 cents for every agent call, and it was 5 cents for every assistant. I'm guessing everyone just uses the assistant all the time. Because why would you use the agent when it's 25 cents and the assistant can do it with 5 cents? I think the idea is you have to kind of figure out what the agent's good at, what the assistant's good at. I wasted like $5 yesterday on just like feedback loops. It was crazy. It's not this app. It was a different app that I was creating. In fact, it's Tom's book. So, if you want to go back into the history, the the reason that I started this project was because I was in Silicon Valley. I met Thomas Buchholz, and at the time I was married to a Chinese lady. We were just chatting. He's like, "Who are you? What are you?" I said, "Yeah, I was in China for 10 years. I got married to this Chinese lady." And he's like, "Oh, my wife is Chinese too." And then he's like, "So tell me more about you." And I said, "Well, I studied law, but then how do you make a pivot to business when I was like, I have technical education. I don't have like business education." And he's like, "Yeah, that's a problem. A lot of people have that problem." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to go to business school. I'm not sure that that's the best idea because I started an undergraduate degree in business administration, and basically it just seemed kind of not that interesting. I just figured it's probably better to go to China and drink tea with the Chinese people, and that's a much better strategy than learning about the hypothetical drinking of tea with Chinese people while still in Canada." So I just decided that I wasn't interested in the theoretical concepts of people in Calgary, what they had to tell me about business, and I would rather just go to China. So I did. I learned Chinese. I went to law school in Chinese. I graduated from law school. I started working for a German law firm, and then I eventually got a job with a American law firm. And then, but the issue is that foreigners, you can't be a lawyer in China. And you can't have your own clients unless you have a lawyer's license in some jurisdiction. And the Chinese, they're not handing out lawyer's license to foreigners. So I had this like Achilles heel. And so the guys at the firm, they're like, "Hey, well, you could do business development. You can come with us." Uh, so I was an interpreter for the brother of George Bush, and uh, we would go around and I would interpret his. He would tell the same story to everyone. It was really funny. He said, "When my dad was the chief liaison officer to China in I guess it was in the 70s, he was like, we were riding our bicycles around Beijing, and this is before America had official diplomatic relations with China, and blah, 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 blah." So I would interpret what he was saying, and then Chinese companies, they wanted to do business. And so it was my job to kind of understand what were some of the business opportunities on the table, and then to try to get them into some structure and then turn that into work for the law firm and then turn that into actual deals. I just had a heck of a time understanding how to do that. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of mentorship. And eventually, I decided not to do that work anymore. So I'm in Silicon Valley because I want to fix a startup company. How do I do business? And I meet Tom, and he says, "Well, you should read my book." So I've read his book hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times because I've been teaching his book for the last 5 years. When he gave me his book, he was mostly saying, "Hey, Blaine, I want you." Well, he didn't necessarily say, "I want you to do anything." He just said, "Read my book." And what I noticed in his book is that, well, he's a software engineer and he's a physicist. So a lot of the models that you see in his book, so for example, um, this is the basic model that he presents in his book, and he says that every endeavor is based on these endeavor elements. So you want to create some kind of effect, you need to create an agenda, and it's based on the potential. Now, when I first met him, of course, I had a pretty deep understanding of the seven habits. So I was like, effects? Well, that sounds a lot like begin with the end in mind. And then agendas, that sounds a lot like first things first. So, so you create your goal right here. So, like you have to decide what are the resources that you're trying to create, what are the outcomes that you are working toward, and what kind of actions are going to actually get you to that point. So, performing the actions, it means that you already have the plan. And beginning with the end in mind, it means to establish your goal, your aim, your vision. And then first things first, it means to understand the scenarios which could potentially get you there and the assumptions that you're making in order to build those scenarios and eventually to choose a plan. So it's very natural for me to understand the things that Tom was saying and to be able to really uh, to to map it on top of the things that I had already known. Now, of course, when you listen to Stephen Covey back in the 90s, what he was saying was that he had scoured the literature and that his idea was basically the foremost in this field. So, I mean, it created a sense of trust, like, this is the best out there. And there were a lot of huge organizations which started using the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, of course, after that, there were some more specific methodologies and theories and things that were presented specific for specific industries. But I mean, like, what methodologies are actually out there? The other day, I was watching a podcast, and they mentioned that Silicon Valley um, TV series. So I did some binge watching in the last couple of weeks. I watched all of that TV series. And the interesting thing is if you watch that TV series and you go into like what actual methodologies are presented during this TV series related to how um, people in Silicon Valley actually get work done, there's only two. So they present the SWOT analysis a couple of times, and then they present the concept of Kanban. Like when they're trying to ship features, then there's like different columns, and then they have to ship all these features. And then you realize like Silicon Valley, that like, I mean, obviously it's a TV series, but I mean, at some point they had to interview people and ask, okay, so how do you solve problems? How do you figure out how to get things done? How do you actually think about what innovation, and how do you make decisions, and how do you decide who in the team is going to do what? And that's all they have is the SWOT analysis and the Kanban chart. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyways, so I spent the last 5 years teaching Tom's work and like going through these checklists. So now that I know how to use Hyper Literal Blueprint, okay, so this one's deployed as well. So now that I know how to use Replit and I know that I can quickly deploy a website, then I decided to like $5, I guess, between $5 and $7 of my Replit budget building Tom's website. Wait, this is the wrong one. This is Space Between Ideas. This is my website. Anyways, let me show you Tom's website. It's fun. All right, so you can see here it is. So it's called Insight Builder. Now you can see all of his checklists are here. One of the main issues that I had with Tom's work was that in his book, we have this methodology of like, right, here's some typical activities, and then you have to make a decision about which direct outcome you're going to use. And he has this page here. I thought this page is interesting. And this page, it's basically the idea is, okay, so here's some types of activities and some applicable checklists. The question is, how do you know which checklist to use? You see in the diagram here, you have the direct outcomes checklist, and there's 11 checklists here. Okay, so how do you decide? If you have a pretty good understanding of the typical activities and the endeavor elements, you could come to the conclusion, okay, so I'm trying to make a plan. All right, so are you going to choose? Are you ready to choose a plan? No. Are you building scenarios? Yes. Have you figured out all the assumptions? No. So, all right, so I'm here. I'm with building scenarios and making assumptions. All right, so then you need to look at the state progress checklist and also look at the state assumptions checklist. So because I have a significant experience teaching and understanding these thinking tools, I can listen to somebody and then select a tool. In fact, that's what I've become an expert at over the last 5 years is listening to people discuss their business situation and then selecting one of these tools and then using that tool to have a conversation. And then through the tool, you create crucial insight. This goes back to the idea of traversing two paths. At the beginning of Tom's book, he talks about augmenting luck. So in the first path, you have some luck, and then no, some method and much luck. So the coin is like how much money you're spending, and then this is how much method you have, and then this is your luck. In this case, we have good luck. But okay, now we're in the second phase, and now we don't know. Are we going to have bad luck and we're going to have to start again, or are we going to have good luck and create some insight? You see, this is insight. This one's big, and this one is small. And this happy face is big, and this happy face is not as big. So Tom's saying, look, two thought bubbles equals direct outcomes. It means enough thought, enough method, and enough luck. And then you get more insight and you get happier people. So I thought that's a pretty good mission statement, right? So my mission is to use Tom's direct outcomes checklist to create more insight and happier people. Sounds great. But then in practice, it was really difficult to help people. Like imagine this. So imagine like you're coaching somebody and then you tell them, you say, okay, so to what extent does the endeavor appropriately declare the value it creates for constituents? So what? Like you're talking to some 22-year-old kid and he's just like, what's a constituent? It's like, so you could see there's a little bit of a challenge for some of these people. Anyway, so I overcame that challenge with this thing. So need help choosing a checklist? This diagnostic prompt turns any AI chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini into a temporary coach. Click the button to copy the entire prompt and then paste it into your AI tool to start the conversation. All right, so you just click the copy button. I mean, we could just test it right now. What's the, there's nothing stopping us. Everything coming up roses. All right, so there we go. So we click the prompt. Beep, 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 beep. Hello, to begin, please describe the primary challenge or endeavor you are currently facing. All right, well, let's be realistic then. Okay, so I have a basic MVP for my product. Basically, what happened was I spent the last 5 years of my life teaching people how to create insight using the direct outcomes checklists from Thomas Buchholz's book, Create Crucial Insight. And as I was teaching people these direct outcomes checklists, I discovered some different insight myself. And I found that some checklists were easy for people to understand, and some checklists were difficult for people to understand. And over time, I was able to create some type of methodology for how to get work done. Specifically, I discovered that the primary software project management tool that people are currently using inside of businesses is something called a to-do list or a task list. And there are quite a few different pieces of software. For example, Asana, Monday.com, ClickUp, Jira. There's all these different project management tools. This is not even all of them. You also have Trello, and then you have the Microsoft projects, and you have Power BI, and you have just a super huge amount of different types of project management tools. Some of them create Kanban charts, some of them create Gantt charts. But at the end of the day, the main concept of a business is this engine. And the engine is based on having a task list, assigning those tasks to people, and then attaching a due date to those tasks, and then keeping track of the status. And from the Scrum methodology, a manager should go to their team. They need to ask what help the team needs and what are some potential sources of assistance in order to empower people with spark triggers and facilitation triggers in order to give people the tool they need to succeed and also help them with the motivation. And at the end of the day, then you get more successful people who have the ability to get things done, and they have enough energy and support in order to complete those tasks. And as those tasks are completed, then they're able to succeed. And so I call this thing a scoreboard. A business scoreboard is a task list. Now, so this is one loop, and I call it the engine. And well, the question is for the managers and the teams is that when we have an objective, have we had a really great conversation in order to figure out what we should put on that task list? And so I have a little module that I call the objectives module. And the objectives module helps people to discuss all of the different elements of the objective in order to create a sufficient task list to reach the objective. So then after I created this objectives module, I used Tom's work. I found that there were two specific checklists. One's called state inventiveness, the other is called state impact. And I created a subset of these two checklists. And in order to help managers to figure out the objectives that they should be pursuing. And so when you go through the inventiveness module and you go through the choose module, you're able to select one or more objectives which can help to push forward the project. And I've been able to create this little methodology called the steering wheel. So the steering wheel is the concept of um, creating a task list from your objective, and the concept of headlights, which is using the inventiveness checklist and the choose checklist in order to create one or more objectives. And I feel like this is really the center of business. So now I have the methodology and I was able to create a simple MVP, which does not actually have the to-do list. So the issue is, how do you create a free app and something that people can use and get some benefit from it, but which is not going to cost me any money because I need to create the website. I need to use the concept of the sales funnel where I want people to try out the thinking methodology, and then eventually I want to take them to buy. So it means I have to create I have to create two different um, payment tiers where there is some amount of value that I'm giving to the people for free. And then if they want some additional features, then they can pay. So right now, I guess my main issue is creating the tiers and trying to understand which tier should be going into the application. And also, one of the issues that I'm facing now is I've spent the last 5 to 10 years developing the methodology and now being able to clearly state what the methodology is and how it is represented into a website, and also how the difference between the free version and the paid version, and the difference between the pro paid version and the team version. And now I'm actually having to develop these different pieces of software, which are the websites. There's a big difference between just creating some kind of methodology, doing social science interviews with people in the process of doing coaching, and now actually building a company and building the website and building the software, and then eventually launching these individual pieces of software, and then creating marketing opportunities and connecting with people. And so right now I'm moving from what I was in the past, which was just a social scientist, to now actually becoming the CEO of this company. And I don't know, I don't necessarily want to be the CEO, but I have the tools that which can help me to move forward in this endeavor. And I should just lean on my tools in order to figure out the objectives to pursue, and then use the objectives module in order to figure out what tasks need to be done. And I guess something that I'm kind of trying to do right now is I'm starting to connect with software developers that have a lot of experience in software development. And I'm starting to interview them, and we're starting to talk about what they envision for the project moving forward, because I have to transition from a social science role where I was just designing the product to now turning to a business role where I have to launch the product. Yeah, that's the issue. That is the issue. Now, do you wanna know the bigger issue is I guarantee that that screen is gonna be black and people can't see anything. Amazing. But it doesn't really matter because you couldn't really see anything anyways. Uh, It's just a podcast. I couldn't see anything. It's crazy. Can you see it now? All right, so let's listen to this. Listen.
Thank you. That's a fascinating journey from social science to a tech startup. You mentioned several key challenges, especially defining the payment tiers and moving from methodology to a real company. When you think about your next steps, what parts of the plan for actually creating and launching this product feel the most undefined or difficult to map out right now?
You think about the next steps. What are parts of the plan to actually creating and launching this product, Phil? Well, I feel like the most important part right now is the design. So we're talking about actual design features. What are the buttons? What is the page layout? What is the user experience from the perspective of the user interface? I have a basic copy of the website, and it's functional and people can use it. It's not necessarily very beautiful. It's not necessarily the most intuitive, but it definitely works and it can help people to get more insight. And now I need to get this website in front of people's eyes, and I need to get people to test it, and I need to see how people use it. And then I can make some changes slowly based on real user feedback. So that's why I started to talk to these software. They're actually tutors. I found a website where you can find a computer science teacher or a development tutor. And so they have a very deep understanding of running software projects and also how to teach coding. And then I very quickly introduced my project, and then I show them how I don't really need to learn coding, but it's more about project management. And then I start to ask them to, look at my app, and then what do they think about it? So I'm at the point now where I'm starting to need feedback from other people, and in order to, so it's not just feedback from the the core group of people that I want to be talking to that have software experience, but I also have to start to think more broadly about launching the website and to figure out ways to get people to use it and also to make comments. So it goes back to the idea of marketing and how to create marketing campaigns and start to get people to use my website. And then once people are using the website and I make some changes to the website so that people are really happy to use it and feel like it's part of their life, then I can start to look at some deeper paid tiers with some additional features that people might love. Maybe I should just read it.
That makes sense. You're focused on the next practical steps, getting user feedback to refine the design and then planning for a broader launch and marketing effort. Is there anything else you feel is important to add about your situation?
I don't know. I would say in general that I don't have a lot of experience with creating sticky marketing campaigns. So on my YouTube channel, I've been making videos for years and years and years and years. And with different success, some of the videos, because on YouTube there's like some expectation for what a video should look like and how it's presenting information. And so some of the videos have been successful and other videos have been less successful. I've also used some of the other like some of the other social media platforms, and I've also found a varied levels of success. I feel like it's more of a business app, so likely there's some specific platforms and channels that could potentially get people to try out my app. And so I'm just a little bit concerned about how to do that type of work, especially when I'm not particularly motivated to do that kind of work. But at the same time, I don't have the budget to be able to hire people to do the work for me. So Yeah, I have a lot of challenges about my own abilities and my ability to work as a quote uh competitive athlete in this world. So like I have to become literally become a new person who has new abilities and yeah, so I'm just making a general transition in the career now that I have the product design and it's just challenging to make this change as an organism and also to be more open. I think I'm like a super introvert. I live in a village of 2,000 people in the mountains in a country where I don't speak the language of the local people. I just live with a dog. So it's like there's a lot of challenges when it comes to following your dream and following your vision and doing the things which you've been doing. And finally, I've succeeded to create some type of application. And suddenly I realized that, I can't hide in this apartment anymore in the middle of nowhere. And I have to try to develop new skills and abilities to reach out. And I don't know if I have the ability to do that. So if I can't do that myself, then how do we become successful since the only limitation is my own weaknesses. State drive and state resources.
Thank you for sharing that. It's clear that this transition is about more than just business strategy. It's also about your own role and capabilities in this new venture. Based on our conversation, I recommend you start with State Drive. This checklist will help you analyze the mismatch you feel between the competitive needs of the business, like marketing, and your own personal motivations and attitudes. State Resources. This is a strong second choice because it will help you clearly define the specific marketing and business capabilities your endeavor needs to succeed, allowing you to create a more targeted plan for acquiring those skills or finding help.
Okay, so I mean, this is the problem I have with Tom's work. I mean, if we jump into state drive, I mean, I agree. If we go, let's just jump into state drive, and we can let's look at it from this perspective. So in this screen, you can see state drive. It says, to what extent does the endeavor appropriately consider the participant's drive? Let's go into the insight builder. So if we go into state drive, we can see that basically it looks like use the state drive checklist to envision matches and mismatches between endeavor needs and the culture's or participants' attitude. Now I've shown this image many, many times in a different format. I think that Tom's work here is good. I like the ideas. I don't particularly like the structure. And that's why I created this thing which I call the Bucholtz drive model. As you can see here, we have the Bucholtz drive model. You can see here on the left side we have the level of effort, and then over here we have the level of success. So if we go back to Tom's book, well, this is actually the website I created using Tom's book. Let's just look at his book rather than now. Let's click just because of the copyright issues. All right, let's go. Here's state drive and here's state resources. It's exactly where the chatbot told us to go. All right, so here is the state drive checklist. and there's some instructions. So it says, okay, so it says list instances of entities or activities. In concept, do the following: use the top row to figure out and describe an endeavor, use the right column to record findings, consider the first four following items characterize categories of success paired with attitudes, referring to being relatively successful compared to similar entities or activities, and being diligent and at maintaining or enhancing relative success. So the key concept here in the state drive checklist is to identify matches and mismatches between identities, entities, and activities, which is fine. Like, okay, so let's say that I'm a manager and then I'm working with a group of people, and like I could see that we need to get something done. And then I notice that the people who are in my group, they're not necessarily the right people in order to get this job done. That's the point. So let's go down to hire a salespeople. There's a hire a salespeople example. Right here. So it says specifically prepare to select a preferred candidate. So here it says competing, the organization's major competitors' general behavior. So in the world, there's going to be competing behavior. All of the competitors are super, super competitive. So if we have any competitors, it means that anyone who is currently in, like has any market share at all, it means that they have a group of people around them who are super competitive. They're working together. They're developing products. They're doing a great job together. All right, next is they call it striving. It's the organization's general behavior. All right, so this is where I'm at, is I'm striving. And then we have this other thing called coasting, the customer's behavior regarding business in general, and then recollecting the customer's behavior regarding the organization. So in this case, it's describing a situation where you have a company and the customers don't really care about the company, and then the customers they're not so, I don't know, they're not that interested in business in general. Okay, here's the situation that doesn't have the situation. This example shows insight people can gain by using the checklist. Here's an organization tries to hire a salesperson. People can use the checklist to ideate. People can decide the extent to which salesperson's actions need to cope with various entities' behavior. See, this is the problem I have with the Buchholz Drive model is that, like, what I don't know, like, what are we? I've presented this checklist to so many people, and what happens is, like, people just don't really know. What do you mean? What are you trying to say? Like, how does this help to ideate? What's the insight going to create? What is this for? Like, why do I need this? What's the deal here? And that's why I eventually made this new structure. So when I explain this concept to students, then I generally tell them that, okay, so, a lot of times when we start a new endeavor, for example, right now, I'm going to be starting a new marketing endeavor, and maybe my general ability is like something like in the one or two or three. My level of effort is rather laid back, and maybe also my level of success is definitely trailing. So I'm like a panda bear. I'm recollecting. I'm not really sure what to do. And then I help students to understand that, okay, so what are you going to do first? You're going to increase your level of success, or are you going to increase your level of effort? It's really difficult to just suddenly increase your level of success. Often what you need is experience. And so as you start to do that thing more, then slowly you're going to start to enter into this striving area. And the more that you're able to strive, like a hamster or an ant, then you can eventually develop your level of skill. So then you start to think about, how can I increase my ability? How can I develop my knowledge? How can I use some methods? And then what happens is you start to develop processes, and then you are eventually going to enter into this competing section. And that's why after this, I generally talk to students about the process value chain. I talk about, how do we build a new process? How do we start new processes? How do we move from haphazard to tentative? And how do we start to merge aspects of processes? And how do we automate processes? And so the idea is that before anything, you have to get started. And as you start to get started, then you will start to develop the skills. And it's not until you're like working really hard and you're doing it with an appropriate level of skill that you'll actually start to compete with other people. And then slowly you can find ways to automate so that you can reduce the level of effort, or you want to delegate so you're able to reduce the level of effort and still maintain a high level of competitiveness. So, and that's why I created a new app. That's why I did this project, was because I liked the ideas that Tom was presenting in his book, but I didn't necessarily enjoy the user experience. So I threw his book into this. I mean, this is exactly what we just saw, right? I just took the stuff from his book, I popped it into Replit. I was able to make an app. It basically cost me $5 to make this app, and then I launched it. Now we can go back and we can go down to the state resources checklist, and it's the same thing. Capabilities, expertise, description. I don't think that's what the book looks like. Now, if we go down to the state resources checklist, it's a list of resources. Yeah, you see, it doesn't, it's actually not the same. All right, so where's the instructions? It says, in practice, do the following. Use the top row in the figure to describe an endeavor. Use the right column to record findings. Consider resources. Practices might feature the following themes. Skills might include. Okay, so it's like you're supposed to record instances. Well, let's look at the example. So if we go to hire a salesperson example, specifically discuss the organization's resources and practices, thereby help a salesperson decide whether to accept an offer, and then, if appropriate, help the salesperson to get started working. Perform work, existing sales practices, support for sales work for marketing, legal, technical support, customer service staff, support a new hires getting started, data, leads, intelligence regarding marketplace and customers, entities, customers that might want to make new purchases, boss, colleagues, support staff. Exactly. So the thing is that, again, with this with resources, I found it quite difficult to teach this checklist to students. And, like, exactly when do you teach them, and how do you teach them, and what's the purpose of teaching them? What are they supposed to get from this idea? Generally, when I teach it in my course, so the first thing I teach in my course is about the corporate menu, and I explain that a business is basically people making decisions. They make decisions based on thinking frameworks and data analysis. The data analysis is basically about what are the what are the databases and data management systems we're using? How are the auxiliary and sports staff doing their jobs? And what specific service or production are is the company doing? So we have these systems that are running, and then the analyst is trying to look at these systems and how to optimize these systems and how to develop these systems. And then the coach is using SWOT analysis and Tom's book and lean startup and business model canvas and Porter's five forces and Six Sigma and all these different methodologies in order to structure the data that comes from the analyst in order to help the managers and executives make decisions. So we cover what is a business, and then we immediately talk about, okay, so what came first, the chicken or the egg? And the idea is you're not actually creating something new. You're not a blue ocean. I mean, for 5 minutes, ChatGPT was a blue ocean, and then suddenly it turned into a red ocean. So it doesn't matter how blue you think things are, they will eventually turn red. And so the idea is that there's going to be a cycle. And that cycle means that I mean, there's going to be, you have to have some understanding of this word potential. And potential means you have some vision, and the vision, it's about what is desirable and what is possible. And once you have an idea for what you want, when you begin with the end in mind, you start to put together these agendas. So we covered this in Tom's, when we were looking at Tom's book. He has these three things: the potential, agenda, and effects. Then we break down potential into these guiding interactions, exciting motivations, and involve resources. So this is the only place where I actually use Tom's state resources checklist. where I make just a simple list. Resources might include skills, data, entities, reputation, loyalties, funds, infrastructure, and time. Yeah, it's nice if you have a deeper understanding of specifically what those resources are. And yes, I admit that you must take inventory, meaning you need to understand what are the resources that you have. But I just feel like it's these are the elementary particles, and the elementary particles are necessarily good for everyone. So I'm trying to create a like a general tool that everyone can use. And that's why I created the Objectives Builder. So this is the website. You could find it at space between ideas dot replit dot app. And it's it's this piece right here. It's the headlights and the steering wheel. So rather than focusing on drive and resources, let's focus on like what needs to get done. So the concept from Tom's book about discovering matches and mismatches between what you want to do and the characteristics of the people on your team. Yeah, so it's true. All right. So I am looking for people to join my team. So I've had 2 interviews. I got 2 more interviews today. I got 2 interviews tomorrow of software engineers so that I can have someone I can talk to. And what am I going to do? So like I'm showing this website to the software engineers and I'm saying, "Hey, we need to make some changes." So, for example, here is the start brainstorming. All right. So, how are competitors, industry leaders, or even other successful in what are trends are emerging that could be relevant? So, is it a list of objectives that we're trying to create, or do I have an objective? That's the real question. Do I have an objective, or am I trying to create some new objective? So, let's go. All right. So, I looked at those 2 different checklists and I finished them. And the basic idea is that there is some mismatch between what I am able to do on my own and then what I'm able to do with other people. And I think that the idea from State Drive is that I need to find people that I can bring onto my team that can help me with these areas. And if I can't find people to help me, or if I don't have the budget to be able to find people to help me, then I have to create systems with current available software in the world. And these software can do help me to do the work. And in straight resources, I just feel like it's like a really long list of things that probably ought to get done. And it doesn't necessarily help me with like, how am I actually going to apply these tools in a real world example? What I would rather do is I would like to have a user experience where the first question is, which objective would you like to talk about? And then the second question is, what are the steps to accomplish the objective if you were to delegate it to someone else to do? And then the next question would be, what additional business services are needed? And then the next question would be, what skills are necessary to complete the tasks? And then the next question would be, what additional tools are needed? And then the next question would be, who will you need to contact in the process of work? And then the next question would be, who will you need to cooperate with to complete the tasks? And then after having this conversation, then I would be able to create an exhaustive task list. Right. So the idea here is that you don't always have the luxury to see the matches and mismatches between the needs for the endeavor and the proclivity to the participants. Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, so because the participant is me. So we're talking about how do you engineer a human who doesn't currently have the drive or the ability to do something? Okay, so hello, thank you for feedback. It's very helpful to understand okay. So that's why I created this framework. So what I'm looking for is alignment. Well, I need to make a list of my objectives, and then I need to create task lists based on those objectives. And I need a way to save all of this work. All right, so the issue now is, I think the issue now is I have the methodology for producing these ideas. And then the next step is I need to save them inside of a project management. So then this is the paid version. The paid version is projects. So if I save a project which is called marketing, or if I save a project which is called improve the app, see, it's not an objective, it's the project level. Because I start thinking, okay, what's your objective? Well, I need to develop the website. Okay, what is it about it that you need to improve? See, that's not a task. It goes back to this concept of deliberate practice. We can see that there are 3 different aspects of becoming a better football player. And the question is this a project level? When we talk about a category, is this the project level or is this the objective level? The objective level is what? Increased speed. So the project level is improve physical fitness. The objective level is increased speed. And then the objective, what? The project level is physical fitness. So this is the physical fitness department. Now this is the department level. And then the objective is to increase speed. And then, okay, now what's the task? Well, the task is to improve acceleration. So how are we going to improve acceleration? We create a task list for improving acceleration. We create a task list for improving endurance. We create a task list for improving top speed. And if it's a task list, then we could say that the overall objective is to increase speed. And the increased speed is within the project of physical fitness. We could also use the cube thinking in order to break it down. So instead of assigning a specific concept to what is a project, what is an objective, what is a task, we can use the cube thinking in order to break down the idea. And if we're going to break down the idea, then it means that, see, but then, I mean, at some point, you have to have some structure. And I like the structure: projects, objectives, and tasks. And I didn't finish this app yet. So I finished the free version of the app. Okay, so how do we define this now that we finished talking about all this craziness? What is the one thing that I need? I need a page. I need a new page. Like I need a home page, maybe a blog section, and I need like a page which shows the different tiers. So here's the basic app, it's for free. Here's the pro app, it's costs money, and then we have the team app. So I'm still doing software development, and trying to bring people team. Thanks for joining me here on Space Between Ideas. Catch you next time.